Christianity. It was late. I think it must have been 2, maybe 3 in the morning. The kind of hour when even cities seem to sleep. Christianity. When the hum of machines slows and silence becomes heavy. I was sitting alone in my house in Texas, lights dim, a few empty coffee cups scattered across the table. Christianity. I had been working as usual, looking over designs, running through numbers, thinking about rockets and cars and AI. It's what I do. Christianity. It's who I've always been. But that night was different. My mind wasn't racing in the same way. There was this strange stillness. Christianity. Like a pause I hadn't chosen, like something or someone wanted my attention. Progress is not salvation. That phrase sounds simple. Christianity. But the weight of it has reshaped the way I see almost everything. For most of my life, progress was the central pursuit. Christianity. It was the thing that gave me energy when I had none, the motivation that kept me awake at night when my body begged me to rest. Christianity. The idea that we could build something faster, smarter, stronger, that we could break barriers that once seemed unbreakable. That was my driving force. Christianity. I believed that if we pushed humanity forward far enough, if we advanced our tools and our systems to their ultimate potential, Christianity, then somehow the human condition would be redeemed. But standing in the silence after that night, after Jesus spoke to me, I realized progress can only go so far. Christianity. It can change the world outside of us, but it cannot change the world inside of us. Technology can send a rocket beyond Earth's atmosphere. Christianity. But it cannot remove bitterness from a human heart. It can place satellites into orbit that connect billions of people instantly. Christianity. But it cannot restore a broken relationship between two people sitting in the same room. Christianity. It can design artificial intelligence capable of solving equations at speeds the human mind cannot comprehend, but it cannot teach us how to forgive, how to love. Christianity. How to heal. These are not upgrades we can program into our operating system. These are matters of the soul, and the soul doesn't respond to algorithms. Christianity. The soul responds to truth. For years I thought if I built enough, if I proved enough, if I carried humanity far enough, Christianity, then somehow I could quiet that unspoken emptiness inside. But emptiness doesn't respect achievement. You can fill your life with applause, with titles, Christianity, with the satisfaction of accomplishment, and still lie awake at night asking why. And the reason is simple: progress changes your surroundings. Christianity, but it does not change your spirit. Salvation is not about the environment you live in, but about the essence of who you are. Without that change, Christianity, you can live on Mars and still feel lost. I've often spoken about colonizing other planets. Christianity, about securing a future for humanity beyond the fragile balance of Earth. It's a vision I still believe has value, but that night, Jesus made something clear. Christianity. You can extend life, but you cannot give eternal life. You can move humanity to another world, but you cannot move a soul into wholeness. No new planet. Christianity. No safe haven, no advancement in medicine or science can replace what only He can give. A civilization can thrive technologically and still collapse morally, Christianity, spiritually, and emotionally. Without salvation, progress becomes nothing more than building stronger walls around a decaying heart. Think about history. Christianity. Every empire, every civilization that rose and fell, they all had their advancements. Rome built roads and systems that lasted centuries. Christianity. Ancient engineers lifted stones into monuments we still marvel at today. Cultures discovered mathematics, architecture, art, and philosophy. And yet, Christianity, each of them collapsed. Not because they lacked progress, but because they lacked something deeper. They could advance the external, Christianity, but they could not transform the internal. That is the story of humanity, reaching upward with hands, while the heart drifts further away from God. Christianity. The temptation is to believe that the next breakthrough will fix us. We think, if we just crack the code of consciousness, Christianity, if we just build machines that outthink us, if we just extend human life by 50 or 100 years, then we'll finally arrive. But the truth is, Christianity, no matter how long you live, no matter how much knowledge you acquire, no matter how far you stretch into the cosmos, you will still face the same questions. Christianity. What is the meaning of my life? Why am I here? What happens when it all ends? Progress has no answer to these questions, because they are not technical questions. Christianity, they are spiritual ones. Progress is not the enemy. It can be a gift, a tool, a way to alleviate suffering, and open doors of possibility. Christianity. But when we treat it as salvation, it becomes an idol. We start to worship our own inventions, as though the work of our hands can rescue the depths of our soul. Christianity. We begin to bow to the illusion that a better machine equals a better man. But no device can make you whole. No algorithm can cleanse you of shame, Christianity. No spacecraft can carry you to the presence of God. Salvation isn't something you engineer, it's something you receive. When Jesus spoke those words to me, Christianity, it was as if he pulled back the curtain I had been staring at my whole life. Christianity, I saw clearly that my obsession with progress was a way of avoiding the emptiness inside. If I could just keep moving forward, Christianity, I wouldn't have to stop and face myself. If I could keep building, maybe I wouldn't have to admit that I was building on a hollow foundation, Christianity. But he showed me that you can build towers that reach the sky, and they will still crumble if the foundation is cracked. Christianity. The foundation of humanity isn't technology, it's the heart. And a heart without him will always collapse under the weight of its own striving. Christianity. I still believe in progress. I still believe in pushing the limits of what's possible, in daring to step where others hesitate. Christianity. But I no longer confuse progress with salvation. Progress is temporary, salvation is eternal. Progress may change the map of the universe, Christianity, but salvation changes the map of your soul. Progress may expand your horizons, but salvation expands your very being. Progress may add years to your life, Christianity, but salvation adds life to your years. The two are not enemies, but they are not the same. One is a tool, the other is the truth, Christianity. And when I heard him say it that night, I knew this was the secret I had been missing. The secret no one is ready for, because it strips away our pride, Christianity. It tells us we cannot save ourselves with our own brilliance. It tells us that no amount of innovation will make us eternal, Christianity. It tells us that we need something beyond ourselves, someone beyond ourselves. That realization broke me and freed me at the same time, Christianity, because once you stop looking to progress for salvation, you can finally start using progress for what it was always meant for, Christianity. A tool in the hands of a redeemed soul, not a substitute for redemption itself. Achievement without meaning is emptiness. I know that sounds strange, Christianity, especially coming from someone like me, who has spent his life chasing goals that many people would call impossible. I've launched rockets, built companies, Christianity, pushed industries forward that people thought were stuck in the past. And yes, those achievements felt incredible in the moment. They drew applause, headlines, Christianity, admiration, sometimes even envy. But what no one tells you is that when the applause fades and the cameras turn off, you're still left alone with yourself, Christianity. And if your soul isn't aligned with something greater, if your heart isn't anchored in God, then all of that success feels strangely hollow, Christianity. It's like drinking salt water. It looks like it should satisfy, but it only makes you thirstier, Christianity. There were nights when I would sit in silence after what the world would call a victory. Maybe it was a successful launch, or a breakthrough in design, Christianity, or a milestone that once seemed impossible. People would be celebrating, congratulating me, calling me a visionary. And yet, Christianity, I'd come home and feel an emptiness I couldn't explain. I'd tell myself that the feeling would pass, that I just needed to set the next goal, to aim higher, Christianity, to keep climbing. But the truth was, the higher I climbed, the more I realized the peak was just another ledge, not the summit. And the hollowness was still there, Christianity, waiting for me. It's easy to assume that success will bring fulfillment. We're taught from the beginning that if you work hard, achieve more, climb the ladder, Christianity, you'll find satisfaction. But achievement doesn't always bring meaning. In fact, without meaning, achievement becomes a trap. You start to think, Christianity, if I just accomplish one more thing, then I'll feel whole. But the moment you reach it, you realize it's not enough. So you chase the next thing, Christianity, and the next until your life is nothing but running, with no real destination. Wealth is the same way, Christianity. I know what it's like to have resources that most people can't imagine. It solves certain problems, sure. It can give you comfort, options, Christianity, the ability to make a difference in visible ways. But it cannot buy peace. It cannot fill the silence in your soul when you're alone at night, Christianity. It cannot tell you why you exist. Money can expand the size of your house, but it cannot make it a home. It can fund every project, Christianity, but it cannot give you a purpose. It can provide distractions, but it cannot provide destiny. Innovation, too, carries this tension. I love building, creating, Christianity, inventing. I love solving problems that seem unsolvable. But I've learned that innovation, when divorced from meaning, can become destructive. Christianity, you can create tools that change the world and still not change a single heart. You can build machines that outthink us, but they won't out-love us. Christianity. You can stretch the boundaries of possibility, but if you don't know why you're doing it, then you're just expanding emptiness. Christianity. Meaning has to guide innovation, or innovation will eventually consume the very people it was meant to serve. Christianity. There's something intoxicating about being called successful. People look at you differently. They attach their hopes to you. Christianity. They see your achievements and imagine that you must be living in some elevated place of constant satisfaction. But I can tell you from experience, Christianity, success without alignment with God is like standing in a beautiful room with no foundation. It may look impressive, but it can collapse at any moment. Christianity. And when it does, all the achievements that once defined you won't matter. Because in the end, meaning is not something you can build with your hands. Christianity. It's something you receive in your spirit. I used to think meaning came from building something that outlasted me. And while legacy has its place, Christianity, even that can be shallow if it's not rooted in God. Christianity. What good is it to leave behind monuments of steel and silicon if the people who encounter them don't discover truth, hope, and love in the process? Christianity. What good is it to be remembered if your memory doesn't point anyone toward eternity? Legacy is fragile without God. Christianity. Achievements without Him may live in history books, but they die in the soul. The pursuit of achievement becomes dangerous when it replaces the pursuit of purpose. Christianity. Purpose is what gives achievement weight. Purpose is what keeps success from becoming idolatry. And true purpose, I've come to see, Christianity, doesn't come from ambition or ego. It doesn't come from proving yourself or outpacing others. True purpose comes from God, the one who created us. Christianity, the one who gave us life, the one who sees beyond what we build into who we are. Without Him, even the greatest triumphs feel like shadows. Christianity, passing quickly and leaving nothing behind. I remember thinking once that the world's problems could be solved by innovation alone. Christianity, that if I could just build better systems, design smarter machines, create stronger structures, then humanity would finally rest. Christianity. But what Jesus showed me is that humanity doesn't suffer from a lack of progress. It suffers from a lack of alignment with Him. We can keep achieving, Christianity, keep inventing, keep striving, and still end up empty. Because what the human heart craves isn't applause or advancement. It craves connection with its Creator, Christianity. Without that, everything else is noise. So when I say achievement without meaning is emptiness, I'm not speaking in metaphor. I'm speaking from experience. Christianity. I've lived it. I've tasted the hollow victories. I've stood at the top of what looked like mountains only to realize they were piles of sand. Success, wealth, Christianity, innovation, they can all be good, but without God they are empty vessels. And no matter how much you pour into them, they cannot fill you. Christianity, only alignment with Him can give the heart what it truly seeks. True transformation comes from surrender. That's something I resisted for most of my life. Christianity. My mindset has always been about control, about pushing boundaries, about bending the world until it yields to my vision. Christianity. From rockets to cars to artificial intelligence, the theme has been the same: if there is a limit, break it; if there is a barrier, remove it. And in many ways, Christianity, that attitude has built things that people once thought were impossible. But spiritually, that mindset fails. Christianity. Because the soul doesn't transform when you conquer. It transforms when you let go. Surrender is not weakness, though it feels like it at first. In my world, Christianity, surrender meant losing, giving up, admitting defeat. It was the opposite of progress, the opposite of success. Christianity. But when Jesus began to show me what surrender really meant, I realized it was not about losing. It was about releasing. Christianity. Releasing the illusion that I could save myself. Releasing the pride that told me I had to carry everything on my own shoulders. Christianity. Releasing the constant need to control outcomes, people, even the future itself. Christianity. True surrender is laying down the illusion of power to receive the reality of peace. Transformation doesn't come from pushing harder. I know because I tried. Christianity. I thought if I worked long enough, thought deeply enough, innovated boldly enough, then I could change not only the world, but myself. Christianity. And while that drive created technologies and companies, it left parts of me untouched. I could alter industries, but I could not alter my own heart. Christianity. I could transform the landscape of human possibility, but inside, certain fears, certain emptiness, certain brokenness remained the same. Christianity. It was only when I began to surrender, to admit that I couldn't fix myself by myself, that change started to take root. Christianity. There's something liberating about surrender that no victory can match. When you surrender to God, you're no longer bound to the endless cycle of proving, Christianity, striving and pretending. You don't have to wear the mask of invincibility. You don't have to hide the cracks, Christianity. You can finally stop fighting battles you were never meant to fight alone. That release opens the door for transformation, Christianity, because it makes space for Him to step in. Transformation doesn't happen when we grip tighter. It happens when we open our hands, Christianity. Surrender is hard for people like me, people wired to solve problems and engineer solutions. The idea of letting go feels irresponsible, even dangerous, Christianity. But what I've learned is that surrender is not abandoning responsibility. It's aligning responsibility, Christianity. It's recognizing that I can't carry the weight of eternity, that I'm not designed to be my own savior. Surrender places the burden where it belongs, Christianity, and in doing so, it frees me to live differently. Transformation begins in that freedom. When you surrender, the things you used to chase lose their grip on you, Christianity. The fear of failure, the obsession with success, the constant comparison to others, they start to fade, Christianity. Because surrender reminds you that your worth isn't built on performance. Your value isn't tied to your latest achievement or your worst mistake. In surrender, Christianity, identity shifts. It stops being about what you've done and starts being about who you belong to. And when that happens, transformation follows, Christianity. I used to think transformation required strategy, like a blueprint you could design and follow step by step, Christianity. But what I've seen is that real transformation looks more like a seed breaking open in the soil. The seed doesn't control how it grows, Christianity. Doesn't dictate the process. It surrenders to the soil, to the sun, to the rain. In that surrender, it becomes something it never could have been on its own, Christianity. The same is true of us. Only by surrendering to God's hands can we become who we were always meant to be. The paradox is that surrender feels like losing control, Christianity, but it actually gives you back your life. Because control is an illusion. No matter how advanced your technology, no matter how vast your resources, Christianity, you can't control every outcome. You can't stop mortality. You can't dictate eternity. When you surrender, Christianity, you trade the weight of false control for the security of real peace. And in that exchange, transformation takes place, not as an act of force, Christianity, but as an act of grace. Transformation is not about becoming something artificial. It's not about modifying yourself with more discipline, more knowledge, Christianity, more effort. It's about becoming who you truly are under God's design. And the only way to reach that place is surrender, Christianity. Because surrender strips away the noise, the pride, the illusions. It leaves you open, honest, bare, and that is the space where God builds something new, Christianity. That is where the old self falls away, and the new life begins to grow. In my own journey, I've seen the truth of this, Christianity. The turning points in my life have never come when I forced harder, but when I released deeper. Not when I clung to my vision, but when I opened myself to His. Christianity, that's where transformation lies. Not in conquest, not in progress, not in achievement, but in surrender. And the more I lean into that reality, Christianity, the more I see change that is real, lasting, and alive. Every soul is worth more than every machine. That realization struck me harder than any equation, Christianity, harder than any rocket launch, harder than any failure or success I've ever known. I've spent my life surrounded by machines, building them, designing them, Christianity, pushing their capabilities to places most thought impossible. Machines can be magnificent. They can solve problems that once crippled humanity. They can save time, Christianity, reduce suffering, even expand the reach of our civilization. But when I encountered Jesus, I saw something I had never seen so clearly before, Christianity. All the machines in the world, all the technology, all the progress, cannot compare to the value of a single human soul. A machine can be repaired, rebuilt, Christianity, redesigned. If a rocket explodes, you learn from the failure, design a stronger model, and try again. If an engine breaks, you swap the parts, Christianity, and it's whole again. But a soul is not replaceable. A human life carries a uniqueness that no machine could ever replicate, Christianity. You cannot manufacture another person's essence. You cannot program the depth of their spirit. You cannot clone their heart. The soul holds something eternal, Christianity, and eternity cannot be engineered. For years I thought in terms of scale. How many people can we reach? How many problems can we solve? Christianity. How many systems can we optimize? But Jesus showed me that even the largest scale doesn't outweigh the worth of one person. A billion machines may run perfectly, Christianity, but if one soul is lost, the loss outweighs every success. That's not how I naturally think. As an engineer, I value efficiency, outcomes, progress, Christianity. But God doesn't measure by efficiency. He measures by love, and love sees infinite worth in the one. I remember standing at a launch site once, Christianity, watching a rocket ascend into the sky, feeling the ground shake beneath me, the roar filling the air. It was exhilarating. But later, Christianity, I thought about how many lives were behind that launch. Engineers who sacrificed their time, workers who poured themselves into the details, Christianity, families who supported them. The rocket was impressive, but the people were priceless. Without them, the machine was nothing but metal and fuel, Christianity. The soul behind the machine matters more than the machine itself. It's easy to get lost in the wonder of what we can build, Christianity. I've seen machines that can process more data than entire generations of humans could ever dream of. I've seen technology that almost feels alive, Christianity, but it isn't alive. It doesn't feel joy. It doesn't feel sorrow. It doesn't long, it doesn't pray, it doesn't hope. It runs, but it doesn't live. Christianity, a soul, however, is alive in a way no machine will ever be. A soul can connect with God. A soul can experience eternity. Christianity, that alone places it beyond the value of every invention we will ever create. When I think about artificial intelligence, I see both its promise and its danger. Christianity, we can build systems that simulate intelligence, mimic emotions, generate language, solve problems. But even in their brilliance, Christianity, they lack what a child has on their first breath, a soul. And that is the difference that will never be bridged by code. You can simulate thought, Christianity, but you cannot simulate spirit. You can program responses, but you cannot program eternity. The soul is not a machine, and no machine can replace it, Christianity. Jesus made it clear that he came for souls, not for systems. He didn't die for machines, for inventions, for empires. He died for people. Christianity, he gave his life for the worth of one human being, and he would have done it even if it were only for one. That truth rewired the way I see the world, Christianity. Because if he sees that kind of worth in every person, then what right do I have to value machines or progress or even dreams above the soul of another, Christianity? Everything I create should serve life, not replace it. Sometimes I wonder what the world will look like generations from now, Christianity. Maybe people will live on other planets. Maybe technology will advance to levels we can hardly imagine today. But even then, the truth will remain, Christianity. Every single person who breathes carries a value beyond anything we build. We can design skyscrapers that pierce the clouds, or spacecrafts that pierce the void, Christianity. But not one of them holds more beauty, more importance, more eternal weight than the soul of the quietest, most overlooked person on earth, Christianity. The danger is that we often reverse this order. We begin to value machines more than the people who make them. We measure worth by output, by contribution, Christianity, by efficiency, as though a person is only as valuable as their usefulness. But that is a lie. The soul has worth not because of what it does, Christianity, but because of who made it. Its value is intrinsic, unshakable, unchanging. That value doesn't diminish when someone fails, when someone suffers, Christianity. When someone feels invisible, it remains, and no machine can touch it. So now, when I look at the things I've built, I see them differently. Christianity, I still see beauty in the design, wonder in the innovation, power in the execution. But I see them as tools, not treasures. They are temporary, Christianity, while the soul is eternal. They are replaceable, while the soul is irreplaceable. They are impressive, but they are not priceless. And in the end, Christianity, every soul is worth more than every machine. Jesus meets people in every condition. That is one of the most profound truths about him, Christianity. He does not wait for someone to be perfect, or for their life to be in order, or for their sins to be cleaned up before he draws near, Christianity. He meets people in their brokenness, in their doubts, in their failures, and even in their rebellion. His presence is not reserved for the holy, Christianity, but it is poured out on the hurting, the lost, the ashamed, and the desperate, Christianity. He comes into the mess of human existence and shows that his love is not limited by circumstance. When we read the Gospels, we see it again and again, Christianity. Jesus met lepers who were cast out from society, untouchable and unwanted, and he touched them when no one else would, Christianity. He met tax collectors who were despised for their greed and betrayal, and he called them to follow him. He met fishermen who thought they were ordinary, Christianity, insignificant men, and he told them they would change the world. He met a woman at a well, burdened with shame and rejection, and he offered her living water. Yanity. No matter what condition people were in, disease, sin, despair, or pride, he met them there. Jesus meets people in their weakness. Yanity. He does not demand strength before he will come close. When the woman with the issue of blood had spent everything she had, exhausted every resource, Yanity, and grew weaker year after year, it was in that very state that she reached for him and found healing. When the paralytic could not move, Yanity, his friends lowered him through the roof, and Jesus met him in helplessness. When Peter sank into the waves, overwhelmed with fear, Yanity, Jesus reached out and caught him. Weakness is not a barrier to him, it is often the very place where his power is most clearly revealed. Yanity. He also meets people in their pride. It would be easy to think he only approaches the humble and broken, Yanity. But he also stepped into the lives of those who thought they needed nothing. Nicodemus came by night, proud of his knowledge and position, Yanity, but confused about the new birth. Jesus met him with truth that pierced through the pride. The rich young ruler came with confidence in his goodness, Yanity, yet walked away sorrowful when confronted with his heart. Even when people thought they were strong, Yanity, Jesus still met them with an invitation to see themselves as they truly were and to find life in him. Jesus meets people in their pain, Yanity. The grieving widow who had lost her son was on the way to bury him when Jesus stopped the procession and restored life. Mary and Martha, Yanity, crushed by the death of Lazarus, wept at his feet, and Jesus wept with them before showing his power over death. Pain does not repel him, it draws him near, Yanity. He does not stand at a distance, waiting for sorrow to end. He steps right into the tears, the questions, and the ache, Yanity, and he brings hope where hope seems impossible. He also meets people in their questions and confusion. Thomas doubted, Yanity, refusing to believe until he could see and touch the wounds for himself. Jesus did not condemn him. Instead, he showed Thomas his hands and side, Yanity. The disciples on the road to Emmaus walked with heavy hearts, struggling to understand what had happened, and Jesus walked alongside them, Yanity, opening the scriptures and opening their eyes. He does not require perfect faith before he comes close, Yanity. He meets us even in our doubts and patiently reveals himself. Jesus meets people in their sin. When the woman caught in adultery was thrown at his feet, Christianity, surrounded by stones and condemnation, he did not turn away. He met her with mercy and truth. When Zacchaeus climbed a tree out of curiosity, Yanity, weighed down by a life of dishonesty, Jesus called him down and went to his house. He did not avoid sinners. He sought them out. He ate with them, Yanity, walked with them, forgave them, and offered them a new life. Sin did not disqualify them from his presence. It was the very reason he came, Yanity. He meets people in their insignificance. The children who were pushed aside by the disciples found themselves gathered in his arms, Yanity. The blind beggars who shouted on the roadside were heard and healed. The poor widow who gave only 2 small coins was noticed and honored, Yanity. Jesus saw the ones everyone else overlooked. He meets the hidden, the ignored, the forgotten, and gives them dignity and value. Jesus meets people in their faith, Yanity, no matter how small. The centurion who believed his word was enough to heal saw a miracle from a distance, Yanity. The Syrophoenician woman who pleaded for her daughter's healing saw her faith rewarded. Even when faith was fragile, like the father who cried out, "I believe, Yanity, help my unbelief," Jesus still responded. He does not require perfect faith. He honors the spark of trust that dares to reach out to him, Yanity. And Jesus meets people in their desperation. The storm-tossed disciples crying out in fear, the blind man crying for mercy, Yanity, the crowd pressing in for healing. All were met by him in the very moment of their desperation. He does not wait for calm, for order, or for strength, Yanity. He enters right into the chaos, into the cry, into the darkness, Yanity, and reveals that his presence is not confined to the easy places, but is found in every condition of the human heart.